Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair, and to a new segment I like to call Short Story Sanctuary. Today we're going to be looking at the short stories of one of my favorite authors of the 19th century, O. Henry. O. Henry, or William Sidney Porter, was an author known for his twist endings that are way better than M. Night Shyamalan's. His stories aren't that well known today, with the exception of Gift of the Magi, which has been parodied and reimagined hundreds of times. So, let's get to the story. The ones we'll be looking at today will be A Retrieved Reformation, After 20 Years, and Gift of the Magi. Okay, so let's go right in. Obviously, we aren't looking at covers, so we'll just start with A Retrieved Reformation. The story begins with our hero, Jimmy Valentine, cousin to Joe Friday, leaving prison after serving 10 months of a 4-year sentence. He was in for safecracking, although he attests to never having cracked a safe in his life. Of course, he's lying. So he leaves and goes to eat, and then goes home to get a special lock-picking kit. In the next few weeks, many safes are cracked, and it can only be the work of Jimmy Valentine. Ben Price is on his trail and trying to locate him. Jimmy goes to Elmore, Arkansas, and quickly becomes enamored with a young woman and instantly becomes another person, and takes the name Ralph D. Spencer. Jimmy had become quite good at shoe repair in jail and decides to take that up full-time in Elmore. He makes friends and even becomes acquainted with the girl, Annabelle Adams, no relation to John or Abigail, who he is even more enamored with now. By the end of the year, his store flourished, and the community loved him, and he and Annabelle were engaged to be married. Jimmy writes a letter to an old friend, asking him to meet with him so he can give him his safe-cracking tools, as he no longer needs them. But I don't know why he's risking getting caught, as opposed to just ditching it by throwing it on a train car or something. Whatever. Ben Price shows up the next day and decides that he will catch Jimmy Valentine. Jimmy goes to the bank with Annabelle's family before he leaves to meet his friend, and while the banker is showing off the new safe, a little girl is trapped inside, and this happens right as Ben Price walks into the bank to watch Jimmy's actions. They are frantic because the girl will suffocate unless anyone can get her out, because it's not like the banker would know the combination or there's a key or anything. Jimmy knows that he can do it, and he does. He takes out his kit for one last hurrah and saves the little girl. He puts on his coat and leaves the bank, walking outside. Ben blocks his way, and Jimmy is willing to go with him. However, Ben pretends not to recognize him and walks away, realizing that Jimmy is reformed and Ralph Spencer is an honest man. I really like this one because it's a good story and you sympathize with the main character because he ends up being a good guy after starting out bad, like in Wreck-It Ralph. The next story is After 20 Years, and it begins with a policeman working his rounds. He's checking the street when he gets to the doorway of a hardware store where a man, whose name is Bob, is standing. The man says that he's waiting for a friend, an appointment the man made 20 years before. It was a restaurant back then, before it was torn down 5 years earlier. Those were rough times for the soup Nazi. The man said that he dined there with his friend, Jimmy Wells, who was his best friend, and they were like brothers. The man said that he had gone west while his friend stayed behind. They corresponded, but they lost contact. The man said that he knows his friend will meet him there. They're that close. The policeman asks if he did well out west, which he did, and the cop says his goodbye and walks away. In 20 minutes, a man in a long overcoat with his collar turned up shows up and claims to be Jimmy. They talk a bit and catch up. It turns out that Jimmy has a position in a city department. They start up the street, but when they stop under a light and the man in the coat turns out not to be Jimmy Wells, and Bob is shocked. It turns out that the man in the coat is a cop, and Bob is a criminal. The cop gives Bob a note. It reads, "Dear Marty, if my calculations are correct, you will receive this letter immediately after you saw the DeLorean struck by lightning. First, let me assure you that I am alive and well and living happily in the year of 1885. Oh. Wait, wrong letter. Ah, here it is. Dear Bob, I was at the appointed place on time. When you struck the match to light your cigar, I saw that it was the face of a man wanted in Chicago. Somehow I couldn't do it myself, so I went around and got a plainclothes man to do the job. Jimmy. And this is a great story as well. And it's freaky. You go to the point where you want to meet a friend and get arrested, but not because your friend did it, because he couldn't bring himself to arrest his best friend. All in all, this was a great story. Finally, we reach our final story, Gift of the Magi, which is a pretty well-known story as it has been parodied by Futurama, Mickey Mouse, and even Robot Chicken. So let's get to the story. The story is about a young couple, Jim and Della, who are poor and cannot afford Christmas gifts for the other. They both want to get the other what they want. Jim wants a chain for his watch, and Della wants comb for her hair. Della's hair is the most beautiful hair ever, and the watch is a family heirloom. Della decides to sell her hair at a wig shop, and Jim pawns his watch. They return home, and Jim is shocked at what Della did, and they have a loving Christmas because they realize they loved each other enough to sell their most prized possessions. And it's a touching story and a fantastic holiday tale. And this is a good story as well. And that, my friends, was the Short Story Sanctuary. I like O. Henry's stories, and there are plenty more of them, which I recommend checking out. I might do other short stories, so stay tuned, and maybe I'll do another segment of this. Next week, however, I want to do something space-related. Hey, Maverick.
Yeah, what is it, Mike?
Could you, come by here next week?
Sure, I think there's an opening. Is it important?
Yeah, it's, pretty important.
Okay, I'll be there.
Awesome. See you then. He makes friends and even becomes acquainted with the girl, Annabelle Adams, no relation to John or Abigail, who is even more enamored with her now. Sorry. Poopy. He becomes friends and even